Welcome to the Storytellers podcast. I'm your host, Peter Lewis. Welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you here for today's episode of the Storytellers. So, as you've noticed, there's been a few changes to the beginning here, and I felt like it would fit the tone of today's episode a little bit better than the usual intro. So, this won't be an every time thing, but for at least today's topic, I wanted to give it just a bit of a different feeling than the other episodes we've been in so far. Before we jump in, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has tuned in so far. Honestly, this podcast has been such an experience for me because when I started it, I had no idea what was going to happen with it. I'm happy to say I've already been listened to in 9 different countries, and I have over 100 plays between my episodes. So I'm already blown away by the statistics of all of this. So getting into today's episode, this has actually been one of the ones I've been looking forward to the most. And it's also taken the most planning as far as writing and creating this goes. So if you recall, if you listen back to the pilot episode, when I launched in April, I had a lot of different thoughts for what I wanted to do with this podcast. And I was still trying to figure out how I wanted to structure this and all of that. But what I still intend to do, I still intend on having people on, really just to interview, and then in the midst of that, have my own original stuff I'm working on. So when it comes to people coming on, I'm really excited because I believe that everyone has a very important story to tell. Um, I'm going to actually share a little bit of my story on this episode. But before I get into that, what I wanted to do is tell you about one of the most important characters I've ever written. And that character is me. So when I say me, I don't mean I'm a character, though there are certainly times I act like a character, mainly around all of my friends. You can ask them, I have my moments. But what I mean by writing the best character, it's me, is that the most important and the best story that I'm ever going to write in the history of my lifetime is my own. My favorite quote actually comes out of the Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, the book, and it's a quote that when I heard it the first time, I was like, "Huh." And it's something that actually applies to my everyday life. So the quote is this: Frodo and Sam are exiting the Shire, and Frodo is quoting his uncle Bilbo. And the quote goes like this. He says, "It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door," he used to say. "You step into the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to." And he goes on to say something along the lines of, this road, don't you know, it leads all the way through the woods and all the way up to the mountain where I was. And when I heard it, it just made me smile because in that context, it's kind of like, watch the road wherever you're going. But for me, it kind of inspired the sense of, when I step out my door, I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea who I'm going to run into, what I'm going to be doing, what I'm going to be, where I'm going to be going, who I'm going to be speaking to. And what it comes down to is it's the next page of my story. It might just be a normal day going out to the store or going out somewhere, but it could very much be the next most exciting adventure in the story of me. Um, so as far as my story, there are a lot of things that got me to where I am here today. It's been a big mix of things, and so I want to kind of talk about this for a bit. So, me personally, I was born in Columbus, Ohio, and currently reside in the greater Seattle area in Washington. And so, what got me here was a lot of things. And the two I want to really hit on are the things that really impact everything I write, everything I do, every story I write outside of my own life. And those two things are friends and then faith. So back in 2010, I made probably one of the best decisions of my life, and that was to follow Jesus and listen to the voice of his Holy Spirit in everything that I do. Some of you are right now probably like, oh, he's one of those guys who's going to preach. Honestly, I'm not going to, but I do have some really good friends if you're looking for something like that. So text me or message me on Instagram and I can direct you to the right place. But really the purpose of it is this is um, I have so many stories that got me here, and I've seen other people's stories come into my life and change my situation. And what I want to find are those people who have stories that will change other people's situations. So, why did I come to Seattle? Why am I here? Why am I doing a podcast? There's a lot of different reasons. And I'll definitely say it's much more than just mountains and water. I love nature and I love discovering those things. But it was a decision that really changed the entire course of my life as well as my family's life. So in Columbus, Ohio, I was part of a ministry that was doing really well with a bunch of friends of mine. And we all had all prayed and felt like it was time to move. It was time to kind of take our journey, our story to the next place. And we all believed that was Washington. So we packed up our cars, we sold as much as we could, and we made this pilgrimage across the country, taking very little, or at least the things that we wanted to bring with us. And so when we got here, it was one of those situations where it's like, okay, none of us have jobs and none of us have much money left. So let's all get in one big house and just share everything together. Um, so family came out in that sense really, really strong. It's a big moment of humility when you need to rely on somebody else. But I believe people you can rely on are the ones you should hold close like that. So we lived in a house together, all of us, for about a year or so. Some of us came and went a little bit. But man, that time of my life was probably one of the most formative of my stories because I got to interact in ways with people I've never interacted before. I got to see the ins and outs of the lives of my best friends. I got to be there to watch their children being born and to be a part of that. And so it really was just this incredible, incredible story that was being written. And it's a story that it's mine. It's something where, I can share it as much as I want. And I've actually heard this story impact other people's lives. And so bringing it back to the storytellers is the experience of coming out here with friends, with faith, following the voice of Holy Spirit. I realized that there are so many stories out there that need captured like this. And so when I talk about stories, it can mean a lot of different things, but it comes down to the things that formed me. So if you remember back on Instagram, the most recent picture I posted was of a pen and a little book of paper. And I said, these are the tools you need to get started. And the reason I posted that is that's exactly where you start. I believe journaling and writing things down has so much power behind it. You'd actually be surprised how therapeutic it is to sit down and just write out your thoughts, write out your feelings, and write out what you're thinking about. Um, I'm someone who is very, very particular about what I write down, but I can say every time I sit down, pull out a pen and paper, stories begin to flow out of me. Some of them are my own stories, and some of them are things out of my imagination. And I'm just like, I'm going to make this into something. And honestly, it's kind of cool because a lot of the people who impacted my life end up in my stories. So a lot of them actually get infused into what I do. I was playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and I wanted a character who was somewhat clumsy, but always came through in a pinch. And that was one of my best friends. And so anytime I think about playing Dungeons and Dragons and think about that character, I'm reminded of the moments I had with my friend who was always there for me and was a bit of a klutz if we're truly honest about it. Um, Another thing that I like pointing out too in that picture is I have a fountain pen there. And so why fountain pens are important, at least to me, this comes from something that a mentor of mine said, and I greatly look up to them. But he said this: the best stories and the best promises deserve to be written with the best equipment, something along those lines. And so, when you're signing the deed to your house or you are writing, like you're signing your marriage license or something, I actually did mine in a fountain pen because it was such a big life changing moment. I'm like, shoot, like this story is worth way more than like a big, like blue ink pen or something. Like I'm getting something real nice to do this signature in. And so that's what I want to encourage you to begin to think about. What are your fountain pen stories? What are the stories that you would rather write on parchment? You know, at the end of time, we're all going to have a book of stories that defined us, things and moments that comprised our daily lives, how we interacted with people, how we served other people, the choices we made, the decisions we decided to go with. And so what my belief is this: me being a person of faith, I believe, in my words, I like to call it a testimony, is there's a testimony that you have to share with people. But what I want to really say is you have a story to tell. Celebrating the fun, happy, fast going, joyful stories is the best. And I love celebrating with people. But honestly, I believe that there are those really hard, painful stories that seem like an uphill battle. And you would be so surprised how badly this world needs to hear those stories right now. I'm not someone who celebrates pain per se, but I am someone who wants to hear your experience, hear what got you through that. What was the thing that pulled you out of that rut? Who was the person? What was the thing you watched? Was it a song you listened to? Was it, a memory you had? And those are the things that I want to capture more than anything else on this podcast. So that's why I'm here. And that brings us to today's episode of The Storytellers. It's the call out to you guys. Here's honestly the thing that I want to do. I want to go on an adventure to hear the greatest stories ever written. And my hope is that through other people's stories, songs, art, and creative works, that it will become encouraging and hopeful to you, regardless of the situation you're facing. Maybe the story that will inspire you is one from someone who had the best day of their life doing the things they loved. And maybe there's a story that someone has about the hardest situation they've ever been in, but through friends, family, faith, if it even wants to go that way. I want to hear what got you through that. And so we can celebrate together and look at, basically episode one of our workshop. Where did you come from? What happened? And now what's life like after that? How can we celebrate you? How can we hear that story? And how can we broadcast that story to a place where any listener can come in and hear these transformational stories of courage, of hope, and maybe even inspire their situation to take a turnaround? Those are the people I want to hear from. So we're just about done with today's episode, but I wanted to leave you with a couple items. The first one is this. If you get a few minutes, 5, 10 or so, do a thankfulness exercise. This is something I like to do from time to time just to reminisce about where I've come from. So sit down, kind of close out the rest of the world and its distractions around you, and just begin to think about the people who impacted you. Think about the moments and the situations you had individually, or even shared with other people that got you to where you are today. For some of you, if you do this, you might just start laughing out loud at some of the funniest memories that you'll have. And some of you, it might be a very touching moment and you cry because you begin to realize how precious someone was in your life. Um, and then afterwards, if there's someone who comes to mind, text them about it. Be like, hey, I was just thinking about this moment that we shared a year, 2 years, 10 years ago. And I just wanted to say thank you. That moment really impacted me. And it's something that really defines me today. You would honestly be surprised at how the timing of this works. I've seen it many, many times where just texting someone that you're thinking about them and you thank them for something they've did in the past or they've done in the past. You never know how much impact that has on someone. There are issues that happen in this world because people don't know how to communicate. And I want this podcast to be something that can help fix that. I don't want to be someone who tap dances around it, but I've heard stories of people who were on the verge of suicide and taking their own life. And it was all because someone reached out or someone had a conversation. Or if they're a person of faith, they found God and Jesus spoke to them and said, your life has value. Um, Again, it can be many, many different things, but there are people on this earth who need to hear hopeful stories of breakthrough, stories that you had to struggle through, but you came out victorious in the end. So honestly, take some time, think about those people and text them. You have no idea how important that could be in just a moment's notice to do that for someone. And so the last thing I have for you guys is this. I've been working on a story and I'm calling it Origin. And this is a story that, just a short story, and it's drawn from experiences that I've had in my life and people who have impacted me. So I'll kind of preface with a little bit of context of the story. Essentially, it's two guys, Eli and Sam, and they're in the midst of this kind of situation, to say the least. They're in space, and they are currently being chased by these kind of android-like robotic people called fighters. And so this is a story that is inspired by people who impacted my life. You'll probably hear some quotes from some people who have said these to me. And these are quotes that impacted my life. But yeah, this is just something I'm doing as a kind of a creative exercise myself, as thankfulness instead of sitting down and thinking like I usually do. I decided to write a story. And so that's going to be the last thing you guys hear. And then I will, say farewell on this episode. But I do hope that you guys get some time to listen to this. And honestly, I'm just really excited to be on this journey. So I hope you enjoy this section of the story called Origin, written by me. The two of them rounded the corner, nearly skidding to a fall. Their footsteps echoed down the sterile white halls of the spaceship. Shortly behind them was the echo of heavy footsteps of the 12 fighters, menacingly working towards their location without any sign of slowing or ceasing. Sam's eyes darted back and forth for some kind of hope, and alas, one of the doors off to the right side of the hallway was partially open. "Eli!" he exclaimed. "Over here!" Sam pointed his finger at the door. Nearly stumbling to a fall, Sam wrenched open the door and shoved Eli through the opening. Just as he himself stepped through, following the heaved body of Eli, he saw a blur of dark silver round the corner behind him. As swiftly and as quietly as he could, Sam slid the door shut, leaving nothing more than a half-inch crack to peer through. Staying his breath as best he could, he peeked through the opening just as the 12 metallic fighters rushed past the door, seeking their targets. "Bloody things don't have an off switch, do they?" Sam joked under his breath. He waited until the footsteps left his earshot, to which he let out a deep breath and slid the door closed until it latched with a short click. "Oh, you all right, mate?" Sam asked between tired breaths. "Yeah, fine," Eli answered, still panting heavily as he picked himself up from the floor. "Can you believe it? The two of us here, out of every other capable person in our group. Ridiculous," Sam said as he took his backpack off a single shoulder and began to feel around for his torch. "Ha," he said, "right where I left you." Sam pulled a metallic blue sphere out of his pack, and with a swift shake, it began to fill the room with a dull blue light. Eli dusted off his pants and looked cautiously around the room to check his surroundings. "Looks like storage of some kind. I wonder if they check these rooms regularly," Eli said as he glanced around the different items in the room. Stalwart lockers lined the left wall, and on the right side held scattered lab equipment strewn about on multiple cracked and broken lab tables. "Oh, this whole thing is such a mess," Eli said. "What's eating you, mate?" Sam asked. I just can't help but think this whole thing could have been avoided. Maybe we should have just gone with what Jazzy said." Eli recalled the meeting held just the day before where he, Sam, and their friend Jazzy were planning an infiltration of the Phoenix, the ship where they currently lie in storage as insurgents, but really felt more like prisoners. "She said we should have gone the other way." "But you said," Sam interjected, "you said we needed to keep going, and I believed in you. Why else do you think it's me here, and not Toby, Jazzy, or even Shay?" "I don't know," Eli said. "Why are we even doing this? We should be on the other ship, heading towards a new planet away from this stupid situation with these fighters. We should not be the ones risking our necks. This is just ridiculous. Thinking that this stupid ship holds some kind of secret to getting the fighters off our planet." Eli frustratingly began to kick some of the items across the floor. "We aren't going back, Eli. I won't let you," Sam said in a tone of deep frustration, clenching his fists. "Why not?" Eli replied. "Because I need you to lead," Sam shouted. Eli's eyes immediately filled with fear as he glanced towards the door, thinking that the sound of their raised voices, their pursuers would soon return. Sam began. "I have a lot of faith in you, Eli. And surely if it wasn't for you, I probably would have been in a completely different situation entirely." What do you mean? Eli asked. Sam let out a sigh and began to spin the torch with his sweaty fingers as he began to speak. Do you remember the day you were chosen? When the Maker called you forward? Well, I was so proud of myself not 2 months earlier getting my own requiem. Mine? Short, sweet, but thoughtful. Sam, be a follower. You'd think turning 16 and attending your calling would be much more of a life-changing thing than that. A follower. Sometimes I wish I'd be more like my older brother and had his requiem. And then there was you, 2 months later to the day. Shy, timid, and frail little Eli. Bottom of his class, not a scrap of muscle on your body, shaking in your boots and uniform as if it was the middle of winter. And then the Maker spoke. Eli, Connor Gelid Tovia. And the room fell silent with a gasp as all the air was sucked out of it. The sacred words, meaning, one who is sent. Eli, not another boy your age, at his own calling, was ever given words in the sacred language. You were the first and only in years. The only one who ever had gotten those words before, Phoenix himself. Now he's gone, and now only his ship remains, full of secrets and these nasty creatures everywhere. But we are here, you, the sent one, and me, the follower. Sam tightly began to grip his torch. So I need you to be the sent one. You can't quit, because if you quit, how do I follow? I need you to lead, Eli. If you don't, we are both done for, and we will never find out if this ship can save our people. So I need you to stand behind your decision, because I know it was right. And you sure as heck aren't about to unconvince me of everything I've seen you do up to this point. So I certainly hope you enjoyed that story of origin. Again, I might add more to this. I might even turn it into a full-on story, maybe even a novel. Who knows what might happen next? Honestly, I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm going to have for breakfast tomorrow, but we'll get there when the time comes. So guys, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. And I want to leave you with this. Know this, no matter who you are and what anyone else says, your life and your story are important to this earth. And there is a set of ears somewhere that will benefit from hearing who you are, what you're doing, and where you're going. So remember that. I'm excited to be on this journey with you. And just remember, when you step out those doors, you just never know where your feet are going to end up. Thank you again for listening to this episode of The Storytellers. If you want to have a link to the podcast itself, you can go to anchor.fm/thestorytellers. And if you would like more information about upcoming episodes and releases, you can follow me on Instagram at the handle IamPLewis. Thanks again.